Welcome in to the Warchant.com report. I'm Jeff Cameron alongside Ira Schoffel, Warchant.com, and Gene Williams, obviously, Warchant.com as well. It's Florida State, North Carolina, obviously Saturday, 3:30, Bobby Bowden Field at Doak Campbell Stadium. Game will be played on ESPN if you're watching at home. Let's get to the news of the day, if you will. And really, I think, oddly enough, it has to do with another program. LSU has fired Les Miles, something that they tried to do at the end of last year and then didn't succeed for whatever reason. I guess the power play didn't play out, but this time around it's for real and he's gone. And the reason that's important, guys, obviously, Gene, I'll start with you, is that Jimbo Fisher is on the short list of names to be the next LSU head coach. I would think primarily to be him and Tom Herman mentioned most at this point. Your thoughts on what that means the rest of the way, other than he's going to be asked about it a lot, and B, whether or not you think he'll go?
We're going to get this a lot for the next couple of months. It's going to be a recurring theme. Everybody's going to come up with their own stories and theories on this thing. But it is a reason for concern. We've talked about it for a while, guys. I mean, that Alabama job, the LSU job are the two ones. Jimbo Fisher is going to have a legitimate interest in it. I know fans don't want to hear that. Does that mean he's leaving? I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows at this point if that's going to happen. A lot can happen between now and when they finally decide and hire somebody. But he's going to be on that short list. And I think you're right. It's him and Tom Herman. And anybody, I think last year people said, well, there was nothing to that LSU thing. There was something to that. But was it the other end that he had one foot out the door? I think that was a little extreme as well. It was somewhere in the middle. So there's going to be some interest there. And FSU fans just have to hold their breath the next couple months.
We know that he and his agent will certainly listen. And they would be foolish not to. You're always going to listen to good job offers. This is a great job. I think it's a very good job. It's one of the better jobs in college football. Question is, are you already in a better job?
Yeah, and I think that's the question. I think there was a time probably 5 years ago when Jimbo Fisher in his first couple of years as head coach, I felt like he would definitely go for an LSU or an Alabama. I thought that FSU wasn't quite where they needed to be, but that was before they built the indoor practice facility. That was before you won a national championship and got recruiting really going at this level, before the donors started kicking in for the Champions Club, the new player dorms. I mean, they've done so much to improve this program in the last couple of years that it's not a big jump from Florida State anywhere else anymore. I think Florida State's right at that level. But this is going to be agonizing. LSU doing this in September did no favors to Florida State fans, did no favors to this Florida State team, because it's something this team's going to have to hear about for the next couple months.
And no favor to Jimbo Fisher, because a coach doesn't want to be asked about this incessantly when he's in the midst of trying to turn around a season that features a defense that's historically bad. And I think that's how we can segue now to this, and that is that
every time a recruit comes by, they're going to ask that question.
Yeah, it's a brutal situation for a coach. I mean, yes, you want to be wanted. Jimmy Sexton and those guys love to have their clients wanted, but no coach wants to have to be asked about this and answer this for 8, 9, 10 weeks at a time. So it's a distraction. There's no doubt about it. And for him to continue to be a candidate for that job, obviously Florida State's going to have to keep winning and get back to looking more like Florida State. Right now, though, if you look at this team defensively, Gene, let's just say this. I know you're going to point out some numbers, so I'll just cut it down to this. Against your last 4 FBS opponents, we'll eliminate the others, you've given up 34 or more points to each and every one of them. If you look at Florida State's record over their last 11 games, last 10 games, it's not an impressive record. It's not a program currently, I know it's shudder to think, trending in the right direction, and that's primarily because this defense hasn't played very well.
No, that's putting it mildly. They haven't played well. You have to go back to at that point, you just pointed out as many points as they've given up, a little over 42 points a game they've given up during that stretch of those 4 games. You have to go all the way back to 1973 to find the last time they gave up that many points over a 4-game stretch. And that team, Jeff, was 0-11. So that's when you're being compared with things like that. The last time you gave up this many yards per game, I think it's something like 450-something yards a game they're giving up right now. You have to go back to 2009. Remember that awful stretch?
Horrible defense.
Georgia Tech, North Carolina, NC State, Clemson, those teams, that was different. But that's what bothers you about this, because you see the talent there. The talent's not even comparable to 2009. How can this defense be that bad? Historically, one of the worst stretches we've ever seen in Florida State history, and have all these guys, and a lot of these guys are going to play in the league.
What can they do about it, Ira? What can you put your finger on why this is happening?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think, as Jimbo Fisher said a lot on Saturday, was guys not doing their job, and that's what it comes down to. Defensive football is about 11 guys working together, all have to stay in their gaps, all have to do their assignment. If you have breakdowns, you have big plays, and that's what this defense has given up more than anything over the last, going back to last season some, but definitely this season, these chunk plays. They give up In the last two games, each of these last two games, South Florida and Louisville each had more than 10 runs of more than 10 yards. That's crazy. A Florida State defense, in the good years when FSU's defense has done well, they might give up 30 runs of 10 or more yards an entire season. They've given up more than 20 in 2 games. They have to stop these big plays. That means they have to tackle better, and actually just have to do their jobs.
One of the problems, though, guys, and I'll throw it out to either one of you, Jimbo just went to bat for this defensive coordinator. Just got him an extension, just got him a huge raise. You know, let's go ahead and, hypothetical here. If it doesn't get better, can you actually do anything about it? How do you go to the administration after you just lobbied for a guy to get a raise and an extension and tell him, hey, we got to get rid of this guy?
That's going to be tough. I don't think you can't do anything mid-season right now. You can keep doing what you do in practice. You can tweak personnel, but you're right, Jeff. You can't do anything about the defense. At the end of the year, if it's really bad, if this trend continues, all these crazy numbers, and at this point, you're going to lose. If you're giving up this kind of thing, you're going to lose 3 games, 4 games. If that's the case, you're going to have to make a change. You don't have a choice. The problem is Jimbo's not going to have the leverage at that point that he has right now. So I don't know what they're going to do, because I think the buyout would be somewhere around $3.5 million. I don't know if they have that kind of money right now to throw that out there just to get rid of a coach.
And then knowing you'd have to invest maybe $1 million a year into a replacement. The one thing I would say is I think what you're seeing from Jimbo, what we saw from Jimbo on Saturday against USF, and I think you'll see going forward, is he's taking an active role in holding those players accountable. Because to me, if you're trying to figure out how to fix this, guys have to be held accountable. If they're not going to do their job, get somebody else in to do it. And I think the message is going to hit home. And Jimbo was more active, more demanding, more creating more of a demanding personality on the sideline in that game. And I think it was mostly for that defense. I think he's trying to help Charles Kelly get the message across to these players.
If this defense ends up being historically bad like 2009, then they're going to have to score a lot of points. Luckily on Saturday, they did score an awful lot of points, and they did so with the running game. You go back and look at this, 7.6 yards per carry, 478 yards rushing, 647 total yards. They averaged 10 yards per carry in the first half. I mean, that's remarkable. Obviously, they got the running game going. How surprised were you by the fact that FSU nearly set a record?
That was surprising, first of all. And it's weird to me that these coaches never know what the records are during the, like, nobody, there should be on the sideline. Yeah, run the ball one more time. They're running out the clock. You're only 1 yard away. But, I was surprised. But I think it was a smart thing to do for a lot of reasons. Running the ball keeps the defense off the field. It's certainly against an up-tempo team like USF. It also, I think, brought some physicality to this offense. And I think more than anything, it simplified things and kind of got those guys feeling good about themselves again. As bad as the defense played at Louisville, the offense was just as bad. They scored 10 points in the last few minutes. They had 10 points basically against Louisville's defense. So I think it was good to kind of get some confidence back, and I think that's something they're going to have to capitalize on going forward.
Can they sustain it?
Well, if Dalvin Cook comes out with that what for, we didn't see the first few games, whether that was a little banged up, whether, I don't know, he wasn't in a rhythm. We saw a little bit more determination out of him. That's cool. And I think the offensive line as well starting to come together a little bit. They made the change with Brock Rubel. I think it was a good one. I noticed while Jimbo said they're still kind of rotate those guys, I noticed on the depth chart there's not even an or by his name now. So I think he's pretty much set at that right tackle position. Landon Dickerson's starting to come into his own a little bit there. Still not a big fan of having a true freshman. I think when you play teams like Clemson and Florida with this big dominating defensive line, that could be a problem. And the other thing, Jeff, I'd say if these guys keep blocking well, so not only the line, look at Ryan Izzo, look at the wide receivers, they're all blocking well. Yeah, Saunders had his best game out there blocking too. If they all continue to play to that level, I think this offense will put up big numbers.
Jimbo has had to coach that way before. That 09 team he knew wasn't going to get stops. They scored a lot of points, and he coached it that way. It kind of brings up a lot of interesting questions that we don't have time for here, but maybe next time around. They're going to be playing a real good football team. North Carolina, I think, should be undefeated. If they had coached a better game in the second half, they would be undefeated in that game against Georgia. But they've got a good quarterback. We'll preview North Carolina in a moment here on the Warchant.com report. Welcome back to the Warchant.com report. North Carolina coming to town against Florida State's defense that's given up a lot of points. That's a problem because you look at North Carolina, they improved greatly just a year ago on offense, 7.3 yards per play last season, which was best in the country. They returned virtually almost all of their offensive line and their wide receiving core and a talented running back in Elijah Hood. And now they got a quarterback that can really sling it in Mitch Trubisky. This is Coach Fisher talking about North Carolina's offense and in particular Mitch Trubisky.
He's a dynamic. He's a guy, I like him, but he's going to be a pain in the tail. He can throw it, he can move, he can run, he makes good decisions. He's a competitor, he's big, he's strong, he's hard to get down in the pocket, arm strength underneath, run pass options, throw the ball. I mean, he does it all. I mean, he's a really, really good player. Really good player.
That's head coach Jimbo Fisher talking about North Carolina's offense. You know, you look at this team, and again, a lot of talent on this offense. Elijah Hood is a guy that a lot of people know. If you haven't watched Mr. Trubisky play, he can fit it into tight windows. The statistics are staggering, but what I did in looking and preparing for this show today, I looked a little bit closer. You would think when a guy's completing 75% of his passes, it's check down Charlie type thing, but he can fit it into tight windows. Florida State's defense is going to be facing a guy. How does he compare to other quarterbacks they've faced?
Well, it's a very different challenge, but it's still a big challenge. You know, it's not one of these mobile quarterbacks who's going to break off 60 or 70-yard runs. So you'd feel like Florida State could get a little bit more effective with their pass rush, bring a little bit more pressure. You're not worried about containing him in the pocket. But on the flip side, he's such a better passer than anybody they've probably seen. Now, obviously, Chad Kelly's a very dangerous passer. I don't know if he's quite as accurate, as consistent as Trubisky is. He's completing 75% of his passes. Last year in spot duty, he completed like close to 90% of his passes. Just crazy. Now, the key for Florida State is they've got to tackle those guys. It reminds me a little bit of those Oklahoma offenses when Florida State went out there in Jimbo's first year, and it was like the underneath passes, and you had to make good tackles. And then they hit you up top when you start biting in and trying to stop the underneath stuff. So it's going to be a challenging offense for FSU, but a different challenge than we've seen so far.
Well, and an offense that when they had to do it last week, Gene, they did it against Pitt in the fourth quarter, converting on fourth down time. And again, he'll be playing with confidence. They got other elements of that offense that you're going to talk about that are also dangerous for Florida State's defense.
We mentioned Elijah Hood, really good running back last year, ran for almost 1,500 yards last year. Now, he's been a little slower this year because they've been so effective in the passing game. And the guy you got to watch out for, Ryan Switzer, had a career game last week, 16 catches in that win against Pitt. He came up big. Only 5'10", but he's a sneaky guy. What's interesting, because they got the guy that compliments him in Bug Howard, who's a guy named Bug. You think he'd be small, but he's 6'5". But he's the other wide receiver. So that duo right there is really, really good. And I think all that works together. Some weapons in an offensive line that's very good. They got 4 returning starters. They do a good job protecting Trubisky. So this is a complete offense that can hurt you running, throwing, protecting the quarterback.
They're somewhere in between, if you're wondering at home about tempo, they're somewhere in between what Ole Miss does and what South Florida does. They're not quite as fast as Ole Miss, but they'll be somewhere in between those two. So Florida State gets a little bit of a reprieve there. They do some of that read option stuff, though, so that is also in there. Now, you look at them defensively, and last year, Gene Chizik, what a turnaround for this defense. He comes in and really deserved the accolades as he got them turned around. They couldn't stop anything last year, and when he came there, they were giving up a ton of yards through the air. He helped fix some of that, but they still don't stop the run, Gene. I think it's over 230 yards a game right now, given up on the ground. They have been absolutely terrible. Ira, is their defense that bad?
Against the run, it definitely seems to be. I mean, they're giving up about 240 yards a game, about 5 yards a carry. I mean, those are staggering numbers. If you're a defensive coordinator, you'd be mortified by those numbers. But they're pretty good on the back end. They've got a lot of good athletes in the secondary. I think FSU, talking to FSU's players early this week, they're concerned. They recognize that there's talent in that secondary for North Carolina, and they will bring pressure. So I think, knowing DeAndre Francois, being as young as he is, I don't think this is a game that they're going to want to put a lot on him. I think Florida State would love to keep pounding the ball on the ground the way they have, especially because North Carolina's strength, if they have a strength on defense, it seems to be in that back end.
So, Gene, how does FSU attack this defense on Saturday?
Well, the obvious answer, you run the football. I mean, as Ira pointed out, they've been horrible against the run. I think they're ranked 118th against the run. James Madison ran for over 200 yards against them, so that tells you right there you can run at will against these guys. But even the passing game, I know you don't want to throw out the passing because I looked at that too. They're not very good. I think they're somewhere around 80 or 90 in pass efficiency defense. They haven't played one team ranked above 70 in passing offense, and they don't have a single interception through 4 games. So they seem pretty vulnerable on that end too. But I think obviously based on what we saw against USF, obviously you want to establish the run first, get Dalvin Cook, get Jacques Patrick going, control it. That also helps keep your defense off the field. I mean, one thing really odd with them, they're really low in time of possession. They're one of the worst in the country. FSU is one of the best, so you want to see that trend continue because if you do have a close game, that defense will be worn down a hot day in Doe Campbell, so I think that's an advantage too to running the football.
Looking for encouraging signs on Saturday against North Carolina. We'll talk about what we'd like to see happen, what's the best case scenario. By the way, the ACC continues to do well, 8-0 in out-of-conference games this week. We'll talk a little bit about the conference as a whole when we return on the Warchant.com report. Welcome back to the Warchant.com report. As always, remember you can go to the Warchant.com game day page and check for all the game watching locations around the country. Florida State, North Carolina. Most encouraging thing you'd like to see, I think this is going to be unanimous, a stop.
Well, I kind of went the other way because I went defense on the discouraging side. On the encouraging side, to me, I'd say Dalvin Cook doing it again. If Dalvin Cook can run like that 2 weeks in a row, he doesn't have to put up 267 yards again. But just to run that way and the offensive line to block that way and the receivers and everyone else, I think that would be a very encouraging thing because DeAndre Francois needs that. They can't depend that much on a young quarterback at this stage.
Most discouraging thing at this point is pretty obvious, right?
Well, yeah, but I would say more than just getting a stop because we saw, 9 straight series they got stops. So I want to see when the North Carolina's going to score a lot of points. They're going to score, they're going to move the football. But occasionally, don't go in a complete meltdown for 2 quarters or a quarter and a half where they score. Show a little bit more consistency and focus on these things. And as Ira pointed out, those chunk plays, you can't be giving up 10-plus chunk plays a game. I mean, cut down on those to some extent. If FSU could hold them under 30 points, I think we'd be doing somersaults. But I don't think
that's what it's come to, Gene.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Somersaults when we hold North Carolina at home to under 30 points. Yep. That speaks a lot in volumes to where they're at right now defensively. I'd say, listen, it's all right to give up first downs. The other team's on scholarship too. You just don't have to give up a touchdown every time you give up a first down, which is what this defense does. If they give up a first down on a drive, they're about to give up a touchdown. It's amazing. First and 10s happen, but they don't always have to lead to 7 points on the other end. I'm going to have to break out the 3-7 towel again, reminiscent back in the day when the program was falling to pieces, and nobody wants that. It was a great week for the ACC. It's a conference that continues to improve. They went 8-0 and had a conference schedule. And also, you got a premier matchup now, number 3 versus number 5 in Clemson and Louisville. I guess you want to ask the question here, is it legitimate to make a claim that the ACC is one of the top, if not the top conferences in college football?
I think you can make some argument. I think right now, if I had to, I'd probably put the Big Ten. I think they've got a few more signature wins this year than the ACC. Even though some of those wins, LSU beating Oregon, beating Oklahoma, Ohio State beat them. Those teams aren't as good as maybe we thought they were going to be, but still. I think the ACC is right up there, especially when you compare it to the SEC right now. They've got a better out-of-conference record. I think at the end of the season, you got to think FSU is going to sweep that rivalry weekend. You would think right now they would. If they do that, I think the ACC can at least say they have surpassed the SEC for this season. Sorry, CBS, I know you have that tagline about the best conference, but I think you're wrong this year.
I'm not prepared to chalk up wins for us against Miami and Florida just yet.
Miami, Florida. They don't have a quarterback.
Rivalry weekend is what you were saying. Yeah. So I hope you're right. But
it's definitely this period of time looks great for no question. Right now, I think there's 8 teams that are 3-1 or better in the ACC, and that doesn't include Duke, which is 2-2 and 1 at Notre Dame. This conference has done really well up to this point. We'll see at the end of the season. Basically, the referendum on conferences really is these early season games and then rivalry weekend at the end of the year, and that's what we're going to see for sure. And then you also need Clemson and Louisville to keep doing really well. I think the winner of that game obviously is in great position. The winner of that game can't slip up somewhere else down the road unless it's Clemson losing to Florida State, and then you have the round robin.
Yeah, I'm just so concerned with our defense. I don't care about the conferences at all. I would just like us to play good defense. When we come back, we'll get to some of the weekly picks and the keys to the game on the Warchant.com report. All right, welcome back to the Warchant.com report. Let's take a look at the keys to victory. I'll start with you, Gene. Your thoughts on the keys? Give me 3.
Tackle.
Okay, I like
tackling would be good. Limit the chunk plays, and that has to go with tackling probably too. Sure. And I think this is a game where turnovers are going to be at a premium. We always say turnovers are key, but in this game, because there's going to be a lot of points, that's a big flip around. When you do a turnover, you lose a possession, you lose a score, and then they could potentially get a score. So I think you really got to cut down as much as possible on turnovers, which they've been pretty good at so far this season.
I'm going to say get to Trubisky. I agree with tackle. And then I would say I'd say run the football.
I've got a little twist on tackle. Tackle in space.
Oh, okay.
Tackle in space. Do a good job on those receivers.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree with you. Getting pressure on Trubisky. The defensive line has not been
very good.
It just hasn't been there. They haven't done much with the pass rush yet. They haven't done much in the backfield. This is a game where they really have to do that against a less mobile quarterback. And then, again, going back to a big day on the ground. Again, I know North Carolina, to Jimmy's point, isn't great in the secondary, but I do think they have some athletes out back there. They've got better athletes than certainly South Florida does. And again, I'm still a little bit concerned about Francois. I think you really want to pound the ball.
It's a quarterback's best friend to be able to run the ball. Certainly agree there. Let's look at some of the games around the country. Some good ones, really good ones. In fact, Stanford's at Washington. Washington, this is on a Friday night, is a 3-point favorite in this game. I like the Huskies. I think they're for real. I'll take them. They survived the scare against Arizona. I got Washington, and I'll give the 3.
I don't think they're for real.
Okay.
I'm not buying into it, so I'm going with Stanford on this one.
All right. Well, Gene's going to be wrong.
I think the environment's tough there. I'm going to go with Stanford as well. The environment's going to be tough there, but I think Stanford's a better team. I think they're going to withstand
is
it.
going to take you guys out. I like it. Make it mark. Miami -6.5 against Georgia Tech. It's hard to know what Miami is. I know what the statistics say, but they really haven't played anybody. Give me Miami, and I'll give the 6.5. I don't believe in Georgia Tech at all.
Yeah, it's tough. You got a little bit of that look ahead too for them. You know, they load that streak against Florida State. That's a game I'm sure they've had penciled in for a long time, but it's a little reverse hook there. I think they're about a 7-point favorite in this game.
Yeah.
Tech looked awful the last time I saw them play, so I'm with you. I hate to do it, but I'm going to take the Canes in this.
Clemson beat Georgia Tech silly, yeah.
Same here. I don't think this Miami team's going to be quite as undisciplined as some previous Miami teams that had a hard time with Georgia Tech. I think they're going to do a good job.
Tennessee got the huge comeback win against Florida and finally unburdened themselves and a fan base from an embarrassing streak. It didn't look like it was going to happen as they trailed 21-0, but they do storm back, so they're riding high momentum-wise. Georgia is lucky they don't have 3 losses on the year. They get blown out by Ole Miss, but do you trust Tennessee to give 3.5 on the road between the hedges?
I do not trust them. This is classic Tennessee. This is going to be the game they'll probably lose because they would have all this euphoria. They're still probably partying in Knoxville. I don't think they realize they have a game coming up this Saturday to go on the road. So I think this will be classic Tennessee. Georgia's going to bounce back in this one, so give me Georgia straight up.
I was going to go with Georgia for the same reasons, but now I'm going with Tennessee.
Okay, you don't do it because I'm saying it.
No.
Well, now that Gene's gone that way, I'm going the other.
As soon as I made the pick, I started thinking, no, I think I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think that they've got it going a little bit, and what happened to Georgia last week was disturbing. I think they may have more to.
Well, if they don't survive a 4th and 10, if Larry Fedora doesn't do what he does in first games of the year, then they got what was it, 27-25, whatever the other one was against them. I mean, Georgia's really been quite awful. I'll take Tennessee as well. Wisconsin's at Michigan. Wisconsin, what a resounding thumping that they lay on Michigan State. I just think Michigan is good, and I'll give the 10.5. I think Michigan wins by 3 touchdowns.
I think Michigan wins, but I don't like that's too many points for me.
Like
so I'm going to go. I don't like just too many points for me. Wisconsin's a decent program. I'm going to take Wisconsin. Give me those 10.5.
In my personal life, I will not be betting that game. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I won't be betting it either. But for these purposes, I'm going to go with Michigan as well. I don't like Wisconsin away from home. I don't like them at all.
10.5 points.
All right, so here's the big game, Louisville and Clemson, and this line's moving around a little bit. Clemson was favored, then it was Louisville favored, and then it was a pick 'em, and now I think it's back to Louisville. I like Clemson to win the game, and I'll tell you what, I'll be a little bit bold here. I think Clemson wins the game big.
Wow. I don't know, man. What I saw, maybe it's an overreaction what I saw in the
You're
FSU
suffering
game.
from post-traumatic stress.
I am, but
so
I got to see somebody stop that offense before I can bet against them. So I'm going to go with Louisville on this one.
I'm with Jeff again, Gene.
Right,
Sorry about this, but no, I like Clemson without the points. If you're going to give me a point with Clemson,
We'll pick them.
Gladly take
Okay,
it.
so now, but I think they're going to win big. Like, I'm going out on a limb here. I think Clemson shuts down this offense. They make Lamar Jackson a passer. They play with heart and a lot of what for in this game. This is the first time they look like Clemson, maybe outside from the Georgia Tech game, but they'll show up big time here.
And that's good for FSU. FSU fans need to be Clemson.
Do you agree, or do you think it's close?
I think it's going to be closer than that, but I like Clemson convincingly.
All right, and then I guess at the end of the day, what matters most to us is the Florida State-North Carolina game. I've wrestled with this. I want to get yours first.
I think it's going to be a big day for the defense. They're going to hold North Carolina at 32 points. So that's breaking
below their season
that
average?
breaks the 34, 4 straight games in the FBS competition. So I'm going to go 45-32 the Noles. The defense shows a little bit of life.
I hope you didn't steal my pick. What do you got?
35-27.
27.
I want you to see.
Ooh.
Yeah, I got 41-27. We're feeling 27. We're all like
You're all under 30 points. You really think the defense is going to go?
Well, I mean, 27 points isn't something to hang your
North
hat on.
Carolina's a legitimate offense.
They are a legitimate offense, but they're also
this isn't USF. This is a real offense.
a little bit more conventional. We've struggled against.
So you're thinking the mobile quarterback's the issue.
Those who run it well, certainly. I like Trubisky, though. If you don't get pressure on him, I could be way off on this pick. If he's got time to throw, he's accurate. He's also got some moxie.
I'll say the one thing on that I like is Brian Burns in this game, because let's face it, he's probably going to get the start in this game, and he may not be great on the contain, but getting off the ball and getting after a quarterback, he can do it.
You don't have to put the caveat. He's terrible at contain. He's great at getting to the quarterback.
But that's not going to be as important in this game. Get after Trubisky. And
you're right. Yes, you got to win first down, get him in an obvious passing situation, and unleash the beast. We shall see. So, good job, Ryan. And for Ira and Gene, I'm Jeff. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll talk to you next time on the Warchant.com Report.